President Presley, thank you so much for joining me for an opportunity to reflect on your service as the president of NARUC. I mean, I'm sure when you took this role last November, there's literally no way you could have predicted what it is that we have all just been through and that might continue to go through. But I've always been so impressed with how passionate you are. I've had the opportunity to hear you speak so many times about the role of the regulator and what we are collectively doing in service of customers. And I think putting the customer first is obviously so critical right now when we're in the middle of a pandemic and so many people are struggling to pay their bills. So sort of as an opening question, you know, the big issue that's gonna still be around when you, I don't think you're gonna sail off into the sunset, but when you get to hand the gavel to someone else, is, you know, what is it that we can collectively do to help customers during this trying period? You know, what's the role of this disconnection moratoria? What other tools might we have? And what advice do you have for both federal and state regulators who are confronting this sort of massive challenge about how we keep electric companies healthy, but also keep our customers healthy?
Well, Emily, first, thank you, and thanks to EEI for having me today. I think we've had a good several sessions over the last several months talking about the challenges with COVID-19. And, you know, I think that what we have proven, both NARUC, consumer advocates, trade groups like EEI, NAWC, those in the utility sector, working together, finding ways in which to find that common ground, because guess what? In a pandemic, we're all in it together, and we have a duty, both regulators, consumer advocates, the industry, a duty to the public interest and keep those customers forefront in our minds. And I think we have done that. I think that, you know, states have stepped up. I said on the issue of moratoriums on shutoffs, you know, Congress didn't have to pass a law. President Trump didn't have to sign an executive order making public service commissions stand up, or regulators stand up and protect customers. They did that on their own. They listened to their customers and listened to the citizens of their state. And we had utilities that were voluntarily already implementing moratoriums. Regulators spoke out in all of our states and territories to make sure that customers were protected. I think that has been the right approach. You know, each situation in each state is different. You have state programs, for instance, that deal that are LIHEAP in nature, that are there for bill assistance. I know in our state, our utilities have a good programs that help to reach out to those who cannot pay their bills. So we work together. Again, you know, the last thing we needed to do in the middle of this pandemic was to sit up and squabble between regulators, industry, consumer advocates. You know, there's an appropriate time for that, no doubt about it. And there are things that we have to take on and sometimes disagree on. You don't do that in the middle of a pandemic. You find ways to work together, making sure that the public interest is protected, making sure that we gave some solace and some comfort to customers to know, hey, we understand the shape that the economy's in. We understand the paramount interest of making sure clearly that we protect public health and welfare. Can't do that if you don't have electricity. Can't do that if you don't have water. Can't do that if you don't have an internet connection. You've got to make sure that those services are available. I think we've done that. You know, I think that it's very clear that in times like this, you got to have not just a mind, but a heart. You've got to make sure that is what customers hear, citizens hear. And I think that we've done a good job of that. I think one of the dangers is the Congress trying to pass a one-size-fits-all type of federal legislation on moratoriums. Look, I agree with the sentiment that we've got to make sure we protect customers. Agree with that 100%. But I think the smart way to do that is states to take that on in their own unique roles, and really, I think would be way more effective than a national, some sort of mandate that is involved in there. Sure, Congress should play a role, and the regulators are listening, companies are listening, but by and large, these are being handled state by state. Mm-hmm. For instance, in Mississippi, one of the things that we did, you know, the poorest state in the United States of America, one of the first things we did in lifting our moratorium was said that we're going to take a unique approach, that if a customer has a cash deposit with the utility, if the utility and the customer both agree, both parties have to agree to use that cash deposit to pay down arrearages, then they can do that. And then the utility can prorated recover that deposit over time. We try to find ways in which to find a middle ground that gets something done. And I think that we've been able to do that. I think, on a federal and particularly a federal level, that's got to be the approach that we work together on. But, I appreciate EEI's work with us both on making sure that we had our utility workers designated as essential personnel. I mean, they are essential. I don't think anybody argues with that. But, there were some quirks in governor's executive orders and laws and different policies out there. Also, when we work together, also with FERC Chairman Neil Chatterjee on making sure access to short-term debt in the commercial paper industry, and we spoke out with the chairman of the Fed. So I think you've got to have that cooperative relationship. I think that the lines of communication have to stay open. I think regulators have to lead. I think these are places in which industry, consumer advocates, regulators have to come together. But I have said, for the last going on now 11 months since we really got into the throes of this pandemic, we have to, as regulators, lead and step up, working with the industry. Don't just be reactive, be proactive, find ways in which to anticipate those problems and to work around them. So again, thanks to y'all for your work. Thanks for your really, I think about so many times during this pandemic that we have all come up with questions. And I think that we've been able together, all the parties, to navigate what otherwise could have been some really big pitfalls.
For sure. Well, thank you for your leadership with NARUC and through the Mississippi Commission. I think you all have been such tremendous partners in helping to educate a lot of, I think state governments, but certainly also the federal government. I'm not sure folks always understand the complexities and the line between federal and state jurisdiction, and the fact that, in so many states, robust programs already existed to protect customers, and how tailored those programs can be to the particular needs of a particular population. And so, you guys have been tremendous partners in helping us do that education. And I hope that we will all continue to engage in this collaborative way. I'm kind of a silver lining person, and I will say that one of the really good things that has come out of this, I think, is our really unique engagements with customers to design solutions that work for them. And I see our member companies communicating with customers in these very different ways, helping small businesses, for example, navigate some of the loan programs. And, I think we really think we're members of our community. And like you said, we want to lead with our heads and our hearts in these situations, but it's been super important to work with all of you. You mentioned another thing that I know is near and dear to your heart that's become really a big topic for us here at EEI. When you were talking about essential services and you listed electricity and water, but you also mentioned broadband. You're also leading by example in Mississippi and at NARUC on how we can really efficiently and smartly use electric infrastructure to cover what is clearly a gap in broadband access. And so I thought it would be interesting if you shared with the folks who are watching this some of the unique things you've done in Mississippi and what advice you might have with others as we think about how we could use that as a model to help a lot of other people get access to the internet. I say that as you and I are speaking to each other, thanks to broadband access.
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely. Well, let's face it, broadband access is the electricity of the 21st century. Anybody that says today that you can make it in the modern world absent a pandemic without internet service has lost their mind. And definitely they've got their head in the sand if they think in the middle of a pandemic, when the entire world, our economy, everything we know is hinging upon connectivity. This is very, very clear. I mean, communities that cannot connect cannot compete, period. They can't do it. And electric utilities have a vital role to play in this. I think that we have shown in Mississippi, where as Entergy and Mississippi Power, our two IOU investor-owned utilities, I know you know what that means, but some may not know what IOU is, may think I owe money. But the IOUs, as they have gone about building out their smart grid technology, grid resiliency, grid modernization, our policy has been that it's just unacceptable for us to live in a world in which you pass a rural Mississippian's home with fiber optic cable for grid modernization and don't find a way in which at the same time to fix that middle mile or help make sure broadband access is out there. This is an all hands on deck approach. These investments are being made throughout the country. They're going to continue to be made on grid modernization. That's never going to end. We're not going to live in a world going forward in which electric utilities don't have that need for connectivity as much as more than the average American needs. How do we use that all hands on deck approach and don't pass that rural person in Mississippi or Montana or Virginia or wherever pass their house with fiber optic infrastructure for just the sole purpose of using the electric grid. These are investments that can have dual purposes and meet a great need for the American people and the people in rural disconnected areas. I think utilities have to play a role in that. I think regulators have to step up, send the signal that as we're making these investments, that we are at the same time looking to fix 2 or 3 problems rather than just one. I don't see any scenario in this country as we go about trying to fix this connectivity problem. You know, Emily, I got very lonely talking about broadband access up until about last year. You know, I felt like you were screaming. Yeah, you feel like you're screaming to a silent crowd in many ways. But now that is on the focus, and we have got to, as part of our public responsibility, both regulators and industry, come together to find a way in which to fix that and make sure these investments are multi-pronged. Give you a good example. In Mississippi, Entergy has worked very hard on grid modernization. The commission has supported that. The commission has worked hard to make sure we kept that a priority in our integrated resource plan. But as Entergy came to us a few years ago with the grid modernization filing and said, you know, here's what we're looking to do. And my question was, what are we going to do about internet access? If we're building all this fiber optic cable, can we not find a way for 2 benefits out of it? Sure enough, working with one of our local Mississippi-owned businesses, they actually were able to strike a contract in which Entergy is the anchor tenant. And in the same vein, we were able to get access to 35,000 Mississippians, expand speeds to 250,000 Mississippians. Right now, Mississippi Power has several fiber projects that are out there that are on the drawing board that we're working with them on. You know, we've got miles of fiber, not only in Mississippi, but in other states owned by electric utilities that they would be willing to lease off to third-party providers. That needs to be done. We need to find a way, if it works, for that to happen, and we're working to get through that. We also added into our integrated resource plan $35 million of authorized spending per year by our IOUs to go out and look. Well, the $35 million would be as part as they go and look at their grid modernization on fiber infrastructure. Why in the world, you know, would you build a Model T in the world of a Ferrari, in the world of a Tesla, I guess would be a better way to say that. You know, we want to make sure we're making those smart investments. Regulators play a key role in making sure industry and everyone involved keeps our eyes on the prize as we go forward in these type of investments. And again, electric utilities are going to play a key role, and we've got to recognize that. And from where I sit, you know, I feel like that regulators are working. We're definitely in Mississippi doing this to embrace a new paradigm where we're in fact, you know, not only talking about it, but trying to come up with ways to actually get something accomplished, such as the provision that we've put in the integrated resource plan. And we're seeing that right now. Probably I'd get in trouble with Entergy if I divulge too much, but we've got some projects that are on the table now. We'll probably announce in the next month that are actually going to expand internet access into some of the poorest counties in the United States of America, and also at the same time get right back to the heart mission of electric utility: reliability and delivery of service. We're going to marry those 2 things together. We've got to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. We've got to be able to tackle these problems together. That's going to require regulators and industry looking at the holistic needs of the customers and not looking just in silos and buckets.
Yeah, no, you have definitely been such an innovator in this space, and you're probably right. You were alone more than a year ago, but there are a lot of folks now who have seen what you have been able to accomplish in Mississippi and see that as a potential model for taking those investments that you're 100% right, companies are looking to make anyway, and have them be multi-purpose. Certainly, you know, NARUC support for companies and regulators to investigate that and how it might make sense for them is hugely important. I know that from an EEI perspective, we're going to spend next year making sure that sort of the other bits and pieces of that all line up. You know, we're looking at whether or not we need small tweaks to, you know, like rights of way legislation to make sure that we can make these expansions and maybe lay a little bit more fiber, a little bit bigger than we might need in order to serve other folks. And I know that as we talk about potential recovery dollars maybe coming out of the federal government next year, as we look to rebuild our economy and as people say, build back so that everyone benefits, looking maybe for some public-private partnerships to help make that easier, especially as we're looking at customers who are still going to be maybe hurting from the current economic downturn and all that. So really appreciate the sort of the amazing example and forward thinking that you all have demonstrated.
Well, I appreciate y'all. I've been on several of these type of panels with AEP, with Entergy, with others that are doing this. I think y'all know this better than anybody. The success of the public utilities is the success of their customers' economic success, their education success, their success in economic development in the small towns and rural communities. Because at the end of the day, that is at the heart of all of our missions, making sure we leave those people's lives better than we found them. This, to me, is not at all. Some people say, oh, it seems so daunting. No, it's exciting to me. I mean, I think this is we're going to reimagine the world in a way in which we've never seen it before, with really making sure that we are scooping up every benefit to the holistic needs of the people as we go about making these investments. We've got to have that strategy. I said to a group just the other day, I view this as a national economic security issue as much as anything. And I think Congress has got to recognize that. That's something I would look forward to working with the EEI in the future on, is how we make sure in what may be a new presidency, what may obviously is going to be a new Congress, obviously, that we keep that focus on there. I think that federal leaders want to help. I think that you've seen that willingness. Sometimes I think there's so many signals coming in from so many ways. This is a place we can work together and I think really have an impact.
No, I think you're 100% correct. And I all the things that we're thinking about are things that could be used by investor-owned utilities. I won't use the acronym, but also by our partners in the municipal utility and the cooperative utility space.
Absolutely.
I think there's a role for all of us here, and we're looking at programs that would help us all accelerate deployment. I got to say, you're such a great advocate for thinking about telecom and electricity in a more holistic way. I might have to make you come to the FCC with me because they're still a little bit skeptical about us over in the electric space, but we definitely spend more time over there now trying to make sure that they understand that our access to, spectrum also is hugely important for our development and for economic security and all that. So that's exactly right. And I think, one of the things, and I've talked with Chairman Chatterjee about this, and I think that he and I, one of our meetings, we talked about there is that ever growing relationship between telecom and electricity. And to deny that is to deny gravity. I mean, it is a serious relationship that we have got to change our paradigm of thinking. This, one of the things that we did as part of my NARUC presidency is I created a task force on emergency preparedness, response, and recovery. One of the things looking at COVID-19, why? To take the lessons learned. One of the lessons learned during COVID-19 is that interdependency, not necessarily related to healthcare or preventing the spread of the coronavirus, but looking at the fact that when a pandemic hits and you've got to send everybody home and they don't have internet access, guess what you're forcing people in rural Mississippi to do? Go down to McDonald's, congregate to do homework. Now, as we look about the national security threats related to cybersecurity, as we look at all of the things that we know need to be done for reliable electric service to be provided, continue to be provided, there's no reason, again, to use an old Southern term, you can't walk and chew gum at the same time. You've got to be able to do that. And as a national strategy, we have got to do it. And the spectrum issue, quite frankly, has been one of big concern to me, simply because of what we know the impacts on the industry have been. Guess what? That all flows to the customer. Yep. No, you're 100% right. And I think that's one of the unique things that you all are able to do within the regulator space is that, people like me, I tend to think about electricity and just only recently have started spending a lot more time at the FCC and thinking about telecommunications. But because of your broad purview, you guys have always thought about those things at the same time. And so we really have a lot to learn from you. But I will say, for me, if I had to reflect upon this year, it is about that interconnection of electricity and telecom. It is popping up all over the place in resiliency and our restoration efforts in our grid mod. So I think this is a real positive story for us to build bridges with our friends in the telecom space, maybe to have our regulators help us do that.
Sure.
as we all work together I think you're right. There's a lot of opportunity to help a lot of people and have the modern economy that I think all of us depend on. So
absolutely. It's going to be about how do we build back this economy better after this pandemic. And one of the ways we do it, if we have a new administration or whatever happens there, and we're in the middle of, I think, obviously still they're counting votes, but as we go forward, whatever our federal government in terms of administration and Congress looks like, wherever that shakes out, we've got to be bold. We've got to be very bold in which we do this. And let's take the lessons learned. Let's realize, just as you said, how in the last 11 months, that really connected, and I hate to use that term, but really that dependence between the two sectors is there. Recognize it, realize it, embrace it, and say, here's how we're going to use that to go out and make sure we are delivering power reliably, affordably, that is buttressed against cyber attacks, and making sure cybersecurity is first. And at the same time, we're connecting our rural communities that need to have internet connectivity. I think that's what the American people want. I think they want to see this type of bold action, and I'm just glad to be around and try to help with it.
That's terrific. We definitely look forward to working with you and NARUC on this stuff, regardless of what happens with the government next year.
Right.
So,
right.
I think another topic that you've been really passionate about during your tenure as the president of NARUC has also been about racial justice. And I thought I would just ask you a little bit about what your vision is for what the role of the regulator is there and what your goals are for NARUC going forward, because I know you've done a lot of thinking about that.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I think that we readily recognized after particularly the murder of Mr. Floyd and what I think America had a reawakening at that point. It's sad to say a reawakening, but that's true. I mean, I think that so many people had really came back to their conscience of the right thing to do and making sure that we listened more than we talked when it came to issues of diversity and making sure that we're inclusive, making sure we're taking that extra step to make sure that both people of color, minorities across the board are included in the conversation. Way too many times, that's obviously just been glossed over. And so a couple of things we've done, we began a dialogue on that. We put out some statements regarding our commitment. Let's face it, we regulate and y'all deliver the most important services to the day-to-day lives of every American. It's that simple. And our responsibility as regulators, investor-owned utilities and other utilities' responsibility as public utilities is to make sure that we are all doing the right thing in protecting the interest of people and being there to listen and do our part to make sure that we recognize racial inequities, make sure that we recognize that we have a path and a long way to go still on social justice and people being treated fairly and making that extra effort to make sure that everyone is included in the conversation, not only just the conversation, but in the boardrooms, in leadership roles, in the corporate suites, in the positions of power as we talk about issues that matter to every single American. Now, working on that, one of the things we've done, and we'll get this, we'll get it passed, but it will come up next week for a vote, is a constitution change at NARUC that would actually elevate our current subcommittee on supplier and workforce diversity to the select committee on regulatory and industry diversity. And so we want to make sure that that is, we not only elevate that committee, we're going to put the NARUC president as or their designee as a sitting member on that committee, just to make sure that we're listening more than we're talking. That's hard for particularly those of us in politics. But it's time for us to shut our mouths sometimes and listen to those who want to be heard. We're doing that. We're taking on the issue of prison phones, where you've got rates that are egregious in some areas of this country, and not any really at the fault of regulators, because if you look at the states where we regulate those costs, those are within the FCC's guidelines. But there's work's got to be done there. There've got to be proactive measures that are taken, not just reactive measures. And I wouldn't sit here today and tell you what every single one of those solutions is, but it all involves listening more than we talk, making a concerted effort to bring everyone inside the table and make it inside the room and to the table, and that we work together and continue making those type of concerted efforts. One of the things I'm proudest of is my NARUC presidency, is I believe I've made more commitments for females African Americans, minorities. I've appointed the first member of the Puerto Rican Commission ever to the board of directors of NARUC. And now I think we have a majority female board of directors. I think that those are the type of efforts we got to show everybody is at the table. And we're going to make that effort. We're going to do it proactively, not sitting around waiting on someone to embarrass us into it, but actually doing it from our heart.
That's so inspiring, President Presley. That's really exciting. I know we all look forward to working with that elevated NARUC committee. I know it's been doing good work for a long time, but giving it that prominence really indicates how important it is to you and to the regulator community in general. I think that's just terrific. That's been a focus for us in the last couple of years, but similarly, after the murder of Mr. Floyd, we really thought, what can we do as electric companies? And, utilities are not like other businesses. We don't move, we stay in our communities, and particularly us, we got poles and steel in the ground. We're not going anywhere. How can we make sure that our companies look like the communities we serve, and how do we listen to the communities we serve? And so we have a workforce development initiative. It's, truly amazing what a job with an electric company can do for someone's family. We pay well. People tend to stay with us for a long time. And so really, how can we make those opportunities well known and available to as many people as possible? I have to say that I'm the child of a utility person, so I'm a utility kid of a utility person, but, and it, catches fire in families, and people become really passionate about the work. So hopefully we can do that for others too.
I think that'd be great. I'll throw one challenge out to you, and I think it's pretty simple. We just did it at our last couple of NARUCs, a poverty simulator, where we went in and brought folks and put them in real life situations where you only had $20 and you got to pay to get a bus ride, and at the same time send off enough lunch money for your kid, and then you got to call about your power bill. I think that would be a good space for us to work together on looking at customer service representative training on those type of issues, so that when they get that call, they realize, hey, this is a real life situation, and that might be a good place we could work together. Commissioner Maida Coleman of Missouri put that together. We bought one of the poverty simulators for our commission. We've not put that necessarily in full play just yet, but I think that's a good spot to take, again, a proactive effort, saying, these are real life situations, regardless of color. We know that it adversely impacts communities of color more, but these are the calls, and there behind that phone call from that customer is a warm body that has a real life, real challenges, and I think that might be a good place that we could forge a partnership.
I think that's a wonderful idea. I love it. You'll be hearing from me when this is over.
Good.
I'm going to sort of end where we started, which is thank you so much for your service, President Presley.
Thank you.
I'll say again, I think your passion for the consumer and for this job is inspirational. And I think you have a tremendous legacy for all of us to continue working on. And I hope you're not going anywhere, and you'll continue to work with all of us on all of these issues going forward. And so thank you again for taking time to talk to me, and I really appreciate it. Given how busy we all are.
And let me say thank you to you. Thank you to Phil Moeller, who I've been a good friend for a long time, to Tom, to Ivy, to the whole crew at EEI, to Alexis, everyone that has worked with us. We appreciate that very much. I think it's been, again, one of those times in which the American people, quite frankly, expect us to find ways in which to work together. We have a job to do, utilities have a job to do, and there's going to be that natural regulatory environment in which exists and should exist. That's part of where we are. But in the middle of what is a worldwide pandemic and a national crisis, we have to come together, and I think that we've been able to do that. Key to it is keeping those lines of communication open, with keeping that customer forefront in our mind, to leaving this world better than the way we found it.
That's a perfect note to end on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.